Born in the chaos of the Vietnam War, the hippie movement stood against violence in favor of peace and love. But underneath the facade of flowers and peace signs were shamans, people who had discovered how substances and music could access hidden realms. This is the story of a man who was there, someone who led both willing and unwilling participants into the darkness he inhabited. Today, he comes forward to warn us of the hidden power of music and of the danger of unrestrained spirituality. Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today I spoke to someone who used to be a shaman, which simply put is someone who helps others connect to the spiritual world. There's a myriad of ways to do that, but for him, he made it happen through music. And what really intrigued me is how he became a shaman in the first place. So we talked about his whole story, and let me tell you that it is crazy, especially the ending. And it opened a giant can of worms about the dark side of hippie culture. What's interesting, though, is that his journey into spirituality wasn't started with books or mentors, but by the sound of psychedelic music. So let's let Cole explain how that was his doorway into the world of shamanism.
It was really a kind of a strange answer to, not a prayer, because I wasn't praying, but I was seeking answers to why we exist. That's all I was so obsessed by this thought. And so when I heard this music, it was basically a shamanistic experience, I guess you would say, like maybe an ayahuasca type experience where another world is open to you, a spiritual, something that's beyond your physical understanding. And I think that's when it felt like all the mind control, because I was raised on television and just consumed it. It felt like all the programming from television started to collapse with the LSD. It just started to crumble away. And it was a very terrifying experience. I'm sure some of your viewers can relate to that. It's very scary at first. But it was like very hopeful in a way, because it was like, this is what I've been looking for. And so I began to really think about how can music be used to bring someone into the spirit realm, like a shaman, because I really I understood shamans, and I felt drawn to that gift of, you would say, being a conduit for someone to touch the spiritual realm. And so music became that conduit. Like this, I know that this works. This brings people in different states. And so that was the start of the path.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I definitely believe that there's more to music than what meets the ear, I guess you could say. Uh, but we'll talk about some of that later, because in parts of your story, you got introduced to shamanism, and so I kind of want to talk about this first. I know that you lived a hippie lifestyle for a long time, so I'm curious, how were you introduced, not to the ideas, because we already talked about the ideas of, like, kind of hippie ideas, but the lifestyle of it?
Well, let's see. So I'd run away from home, 15. I actually got busted for LSD possession on Halloween night, put into juvenile. Then they put me into a drug rehab kind of place called Daytop, and I was released when I was 17. And I went to a place called Greenville Avenue in Dallas. But this old hippie lady came up to me, and we were talking, and she was like, "Hey, there's an apartment for rent." And I ended up moving there. It was this 3-story big hippie house called the Prospect House. Kind of infamous. It had been going on since the 60s and deep in Lower Greenville. But yeah, that's when really got introduced into hand drumming. So we would have drum circles, playing congos, djembes, that kind of thing. We'd take our drums down to Deep Elm and have big street jams. I mean, the whole streets would be crazy. I mean, it was wild. That in Deep Elm back then, I mean, the cops would come and, like, with riot gear and just push everybody out, and there was big dancing, just mayhem. We'd bring our drums. And so, yeah, that's when it started. It was first just drum jamming, and we do just drum African style or South American style stuff like that. But I began to really start to experiment, especially with acid parties when everyone was tripping. I would just start playing the drums, and I would start to slow the time signatures and speed them up, kind of like almost like a record being slowed down and up. And I found that it would make the atmosphere very strange. And so I kept pressing into this kind of speed, trippy kind of speed thing, and also changing the beat structures so that they would shift. It's hard to explain it, but um, and so yeah, that's when I was like, okay, I want to start messing with music and messing with people, because it's very manipulative. I mean, when you're doing that kind of magic, you're pushing people into a place that they didn't necessarily ask you to take them, you know. But I really I believed it was my gift and my duty to push people into the spirit realm, into these really strange, um, very surreal atmospheres, and that's when it started. Hmm.
Do you have an idea of how that works, and to what extent can someone be manipulated by music?
Wow, that's an awesome question. It's one I'm really passionate about. That we we in general are extremely controlled by technology, by music. And the beauty of a good manipulation, a good mind control, especially, is that you don't realize that you're being manipulated, right? And so, yeah, for manipulating music, there's frequency is a huge part of that. Where high frequencies, like say Bach and Beethoven, those kinds of they're higher registers, that's more cerebral. That's why they say, that kind of music is very good for babies to develop like more intelligent thinking. And then if you go to the lower frequencies are more hit you more emotionally. This is just on the physical plane. We have spirit, we have soul, we have a body. Our spirit somehow is like an antenna. Um, I think that's how spirit guides will interact with someone who's opens to that. So with music, if a spiritual person, a human who has a spirit with an intention and all these things is creating a music and creating vibration to have an effect on the people around them, it has an effect, you know. And so when you take drugs, especially when you take LSD, especially mushrooms, of course, so psychedelics, drugs, you get wide open to the spirit realm, to the to that psychic kind of realm, and so you're I would say more easily open to these kinds of influences.
Yeah. I feel like there's probably two kinds of people listening right now. There's the people that are pretty confused about this, which I would fit in that category because I don't have a frame of reference to understand that. And there's the people that probably totally understand what you're talking about. So
Hmm.
I would be curious to know how many people actually like have lived something like this and can relate to it. But a big part of your story, I should keep saying that, but there's a lot of big parts of your story. But I guess the next part of your story, you started living in hippie camps. I don't necessarily know like what a hippie camp is, except that it's a camp with a bunch of hippies. But I'm sure that there's more complexity to it. So, how did you start living there, and what happened when you got into these camps?
Yeah, let's see. So the Prospect House, which is the big three-story hippie house, um, uh, came to an end in a dramatic way. So I became homeless at the time. I became just started sleeping on rooftops of the neighborhood I was in, Lower Greenville. You could just climb up ladders onto the storefronts and sleep up there. And so I started doing that, and then I ended up going to New Mexico, and I I just was there alone. And I remember walking around, had just a backpack, and I came upon this hippie encampment. It was outside of town that was kind of near downtown. And, there's just all these little tiny campfires. I was trying to, find somebody with a joint so I could smoke some weed. And I came upon this one encampment, and I saw the most beautiful girl I've ever laid eyes on, and just was smitten, just tall. She was this blonde, very strange looking hippie chick, and right away we just hit it off and became really involved. We started traveling together, and yeah, so from that point I was excuse me, I was traveling to some degree. We'd stay, at different places, different crash pads, or when you travel in that scene, you just it naturally get connected with people who are like-minded. So people are you'll come into like a town, they'll be like, hey, you just gravitate, and they'll be like, hey, this is where you can get free food. This is, every Wednesday and Friday you can come here and get breakfast, and that kind of thing. So it's definitely a lifestyle.
What was your next big step in terms of your shamanistic journey? Because so far, we talked about the practices a little bit, and it escalated maybe a tiny bit when you went to the hippie house, or maybe a decent amount. Actually, I don't know how much, but there's an escalation of these practices becoming more intense with a lot of people. So, what was the next big step in terms of graduating to other levels of shamanism and of music manipulation kind of thing?
Yeah, so me and this girl traveled a lot, and we finally ended up going to Portland, Oregon. Her mom lived there, but we didn't live with her mom, but we lived in a we stayed at a crash party house, and we were unemployed, still homeless, kind of, but we had this crash house, and there was this man who was part of this, and he just had this really intense vibe, and excuse me, to describe him, he was white skin, freckles, red, froey hair that was long, and wore like gray coveralls that were dirty, just like a mechanic. Look, very kind of creepy guy. And we began really with taking acid together. He just by his presence and the things that he would do, he would take us into really dark dimensions. And I mean, it was like he could say half a sentence to you with his lips and then stop talking, and then the rest of it would be psychically, you could hear him, and then he'd kind of smirk at you, and then it just got darker and darker. And so yeah, I really believed that this universe was giving me this person as the next teacher. So he would teach without teaching, in a sense. It was like wrong and right is the same as left and right, or salt and pepper, and that good and evil are just spectrums on an energy plane. And so as a human experiencing this reality, to get beyond all of that to the next level, you must embrace the whole gamut of it. It's just a way of thinking that these spirit guides were teaching me. Like an example, just like during acid parties or something, there'd be a lot of pressure maybe to do something, or to go into places that were very uncomfortable and felt really evil. But the pressure was the spiritual um, guides teaching me, like, you need to, it was basically like that the concept of evil was a man-made society program thing that had to be shed and rejected. And you find that's very common in a lot of the counterculture, the movement of the 60s. There was some of that, and that, the old moralities and all that kind of thing. So yeah, he was a very influential person for me.
So what does that look like in day-to-day life, embracing darkness? Because so far, like, we're talking about a concept, but I know that there probably were things that he was doing that he introduced you to. Can you explain maybe in more concrete terms what that looked like in your life?
So in this culture, in the society of, especially the party scene, especially the scene that I was in, there's a constant pressure to go into open relationship, orgy, free love type of thing, even homosexuality, bisexuality, all that stuff. Like the woman I was with, this young girl I was with, I was very jealous, because there was this pressure for us to have open relationship with everybody, and then that evolved into all that stuff. But that's maybe a concrete, where your conscience is like, I don't want to have this, but it feels like this pressure of, that's the old morality. That's a social conditioning that needs to be broken. Your jealousy is a conditioning that needs to be extinguished, that kind of thing. So that was all part of it.
Would it be fair to say that, like, the overarching thing that was present in this group, or that this guy was teaching, was that you needed to suppress your conscience?
Absolutely.
So now you suppress the conscience of monogamy because you're in love with this girl or woman. I don't know how old you were. And now there's this pressure. So I understand how that would be uncomfortable. You talked about realms and dark realms, which to me is difficult to conceptualize. But when you're talking about these things, like, how do you even end? How would you enter that? How would you do that? I know that psychedelics was probably a way to do it, but was there rituals that you would do to try to enter these realms?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me begin. I'll start back with, and it goes back to music. There was this band in the 90s called Crash Worship. And Crash Worship was a group of individuals that their concerts, they would do live shows, usually in some abandoned warehouse, or sometimes they did clubs, but they usually got kicked out because it was too crazy. But the show, you go in and it's utter chaos, smoke, strobe. The band isn't on a stage. They come out and they have these big drums that they have attached to them, and they're playing this tribal drumming, and they have gas masks on and weird clothes, black paint all over their body. All these people are involved, and they throw blood and powder. They've been known to spray the crowd with LSD and blood and sugar. And it's almost like entering a haunted house, but this tribalistic haunted house. It's just all pervasive. There's no hiding. Like, if you are in the back just observing, they have what they call these, I don't know the names, I can't think offhand, but these people who come up, a lot of times they're just naked people who will just grab you and throw you in the middle. And back then there was no cell phones. There was all we had is pagers if you were a drug dealer. So what that meant is that it was a secret place. Like, there was no outside influence of the world. Like today, you've got these crazy concerts that might be really intense, but everyone has their phone out, and the outside world, there's like, it almost breaks the secrecy of this place. So But back then, it was a ritual. It was a magic ritual. There was no outsiders. There was no people looking in. There was no any of that. So the feeling of isolation, it was intense. So this show, I went to one. It was very intense, and I started to. It was so intense, and I was like, man, this was part of where I felt the universe was drawing me to embrace a darker reality, because this was really dark, but I was trying to embrace it as a spiritual path, and so fast forward, we get to Portland with this man, and we've got these acid parties going on. He really loved crash worship, so we would really the what really started it was we'd have these parties with LSD, a lot of wine, jugs of wine, and we would make these, where the house we were in had this basement that you'd walk down the stairs, and the ceiling was high, so you could stand in it. And it was pitch dark, really creepy. He actually lived down there and slept on a mattress. It was very strange. But during the parties, we would make torches with rags and a stick and oil, and we'd all go down there and do these drum jams in this cellar. And the first time we did this, I started to try to do my drum manipulation with the time signature changes and slowing and speeding up, warping the speed and all that stuff. But then this man who had this really intense dark energy and this power, he started to just chaotically beat these drums, just without rhythm, just chaos. And I instinctually knew, okay, I want to follow his lead. And this is something new, different. And so the rhythms, they became non-rhythm. They became mocking and fighting rhythms with each other, very chaotic. And we just keep going into this. And of course, we were on a lot of acid. And then things would start to change, like in the this is when I first experienced full on, I think, a drum possession. And it wasn't like I'm not talking about being in the pocket with musicians, like feeling the groove and getting in sync. It's not what I'm talking about. This was like something else entering your hands. And that's like, and all of a sudden, like your reality, like this cellar that we were in turned into, the best way I could describe it was, if anyone's seen that movie Hellraiser, and there's the room of chains, we were like translated into another dimension, and it was hell. It was a hellish place, a void that it was like you could hear fire and hear chains and hear all the sounds were like hyper realistic. And all of a sudden now you're in the psychic realm. So you're connected psychically with people, and any kind of backpedaling, like I said, in your conscience is noted and felt by the others. And my conscience was screaming at me, just pleading me, don't do this, don't do this. And I could hear, like physically hear in my ear, in my mind, in my soul, like this angry voice of the other spirit, like saying, do it, just do it, just do it. And it was like, it felt like it felt like murdering a child, you know? And it was like, it felt that wicked. In the child, I guess it was my own spirit, I guess, you'd say. I didn't know what else to do but just go with where my life was going, and I just forced myself to completely open myself. And it felt like your breath being pulled out of you, and I just collapsed. I urinated my clothes. I lay on the floor. It's just like emptied out, and it felt like my breath was just pulled out forcibly, and yeah, and I sat there. I was speechless. It was like my voice had been taken. I was there for I don't know how long, an hour at least. I was there, and it was so long, and the whole thing was started to die down. People were starting to worry about me, and they were like, "Should we call the ambulance?" And all this. I was hearing all these things from afar, and it was dark. And finally, I got up to help with somebody, and I couldn't talk for the whole night and into the next morning, and I just felt dirty. I felt like something was in me, and it felt like the sparkle in my eye, any joy had been ripped out of me. Um, so that was my first like heavy experience, and after that, it was I began to almost lust after um, taking other people into that violating space. I devolved so much that people would sleep in the house during the day, and I would like meditate, and because we were practicing sex magic and different stuff like that, and so I was practicing getting into people's dreams and like violating them sexually. And they would like wake up and go, what's happening, and then I would be ashamed, and just I was under complete delusion that I could do whatever I wanted in my mind in the magic realm without any consequences, which is not true at all. And so, yeah, after that point, it started to get really black quickly. Yeah.
The conscience, at least to me, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, is kind of the guardrail that we have, and it's like protection. And once you violate that, then you're into a world where you're a victim to whatever wants to attach itself to you. One thing you said that I'm having a hard time to wrap my head around is how this music was able to kind of, I don't even like, manipulate the consciousness of the people that were there, um, into this whole different realm, and how these spirits would be channeled. I don't understand how that works. The only thing that I understand is that music has the ability to do that, and that's what I think I find very interesting. Uh, from previous things that you've said, I think you called this kind of thing, the concert that you talked about and the things you were doing in the basement, I think you called that chaos magic. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
What is chaos magic? Is there more to it than what you've already explained? Maybe you've already explained it pretty well, but what is it, and what does it do? Essentially, like, do you understand why it has that effect?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, chaos magic. Um, actually, we're being, as a population, exposed to chaos magic. A form of chaos magic is juxtaposition. So a lot of modern art is into this kind of juxtaposition phenomena, where you've got, like, say, a beautiful oil painting with a bouquet of flowers, and then like a severed head that's rotting. I mean, that's juxtaposition, like beauty and like disgusting. And so, yeah, if you were to like do a Wikipedia search on chaos magic, it comes up just different things. One of um, one of some notable people who practice it is William Burroughs. Was a kind of a beatnik writer, and what he did, very evil guy. He uh, he would take either his writings or books, and then he would cut out words, and then you mix them up and then rearrange them. And that's a form of chaos magic where it's almost like it's almost like a tarot type of thing where you're mixing these things up and then pulling them out. That's a form of chaos magic. I would say what we were doing is the most extreme you could get, but there's definitely, if you were to study it, there's definitely more subtle nuances of chaos magic for sure. It's a big gambit. I mean, it's a broad definition. It's highly based on intuitiveness too. So, that you have some magic, religious practice that's very by the book, I guess. Chaos magic is probably more intuitive. So yeah, but yeah, chaos magic.
And why is it magic and not just chaos? Because it seems like just chaos, but why is there this spiritual, magical aspect to it? Or how do you conjure that into it, or however that works? I don't fully understand. I'm hoping you can maybe shed some light on that.
Wow. Well, it's a deep question. I would say doing acts that are against um, the biblical morality opens up dimensions of power, or doing things that are unnatural, like can open up realms of power. So this whole process of us doing chaos, because drumming is not of the order of rhythm, like where the creator created rhythm. It's beautiful. It connects. It's like there's this thing that brings people together. It has life in some ways. But when you deviate from it and you create just random chaos, it's similar to how like Aleister Crowley would do things that were just gross or despicable, or a lot of homosexual acts can be used um, in dark magic ritual. Take take away just the political whatever, and you just look at it scientifically, like the human body was made a certain way. You do it differently. That's that can be used. Like Aleister Crowley used homosexuality a lot to open up realms of these dimensions, and it does call entities for some reason. Murder, is unnatural. Like God, Creator said, do not commit murder. And so you've got human sacrifice is like the ultimate awful, chaos magic, right? So you're killing, you're going against the creator's wishes, and you're opening up, realms of power. Why that all works, I don't know that question, but it definitely can attract demons. So there's a movie called Odd Thomas that was really interesting. Like, but yeah, these entities would be drawn to these violent acts, and it would kind of surround these people who are doing wicked things. But so yeah, it's interesting.
Were there ever moments that you questioned this whole direction of your life, like suppressing your conscience and heading into where you thought the universe was guiding you? Right? Were there moments where you're like, I'm not sure that this is actually the way?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, it was always a wrestling match. Um, but like my spirit man w- was crying out for something that's true, that's loving, that's kindness. Always wanted heaven, the reality of heaven, where light and love reign. But then there was my flesh, which loved things that were darker. Of course, the lust of the flesh, all the open relationship, all that stuff. I mean, in the desire for being intoxicated and partying and being crazy, all that stuff warred. So it was, it's a wrestling match like anybody would have with the nature of their own flesh, I guess.
What happened with you and your girlfriend in this environment where polyamory was encouraged?
It put us in a weird space. I think we were both resentful. Um, she started being with this one other guy. Um, but we were kind of forced that we all have to be friends together, and so it was miserable. It was miserable, you know. And I didn't know how to really love truly, and so yeah, it was miserable. It was very miserable. We ended up kind of hitchhiking together as like this kind of trio thing where it was like a timeshare, you know, where it was just wrong. The whole thing was a mess. And I finally left them in San Francisco one day. I just was like, I'm done. And yeah, it was very sad. I've never been able to find her. Um, and I've always wanted to ask her forgiveness. Always, because she was my first love. You know, who I was completely just adored, but I was unable to cultivate true love. Very sad.
So this whole journey started with an awakening through, music, and an awakening that there was more to reality than, the physical world around us. But that was not the only awakening. You had another uh, awakening, deeper awakening, I guess you could say. So I wanted you to share the story of what happened and the circumstances around that.
So yeah, San Francisco. I left them finally, and there was back in the day there was this bus called the Green Tortoise in San Francisco, and it would take people free up the coast, free or really cheap. I can't remember, but I remember getting on that bus and ended up somewhere near Eugene. But that's when I ran into my best friend, who is the guy that I lived with when I ran away from home. He was my best friend. His name was Chris. He's passed now, but he went by Cosmic. And or Cosmic, he was like the biggest acid dealer on the West Coast, or one of the biggest ones at the time. It's kind of an interesting story, but he was wanted in Texas, and never was arrested. But he, I just ran into him at it was like a farmer's market somewhere in near Eugene, and he was traveling with the dead with a few other people, and they were selling acid at the dead shows. So that's that. I started traveling with him, and only went to a couple dead shows, but this really the most profound experience. All of this kind of coming to a head. We were at a dead show in Eugene, or near Eugene, and how it worked. We would go to a hotel, like a motel, really cheap motel at night, and we'd lay the acid. They'd start with the crystal LSD, and they'd put it in Everclear in a tray, and get a black light, and you dip the paper. And so some of them would sell pages of acid, like or books of acid, like multiple pages, which is 10 sheets. A page is 10 sheets. And then some people would sell the sheets, which are 100 hits. And then I was the least responsible, so they would give me the singles. So I was doing single hits. And I remember this one day. I mean, it was there. It's only like, what is it, 2-day festival, but I was walking around tripping acid. It was the daytime. I remember going and walking, and there was this Ken Kesey bus, which is like kind of like they're associated kind of with the Grateful Dead, but the Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. They had these school buses that were painted all psychedelic back in the 60s, 70s. But there was one there, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I want to check it out. I love art. And so I started walking around, and all these psychedelic designs. And I get to the other side, and there was the painting of the Masonic pyramid. And it said, a New World Order, what is it, in Latin. And it was shocking, because I was like, wait a second, why is this weird? I always envision the Masons as being this dark thing that was a part of the government, part of when you go to like Washington D.C., the whole town is laid out in Masonic symbols, and all the Masonic stuff. I was like, this is And that was like, what is going on? Why is the Masonic in this festival? I thought we were the good guys and they were, so that was very strange. And that very same day, my friend, the acid dealer, he gave me a dare, and he was like, "Hey, let's go for it." And he tore this big piece of acid, and we ate a tremendous amount of LSD together, me and him, and ended up getting separated. I was trying to sell acid in this big sea of people, and it had turned dark. It was at night. All these people, because at the Dead shows in the parking lot, people sell all kinds of, you can buy everything all out in the open. You can buy beer, you can buy grilled cheese sandwiches, drugs, all the stuff. It's all out there. And I started really feeling the acid, and everything was just, it felt like a whole machine was slowing down, like reality was coming to a halt and a grind. And I couldn't speak anymore. I couldn't sell acid anymore. I just stopped and like stood there, and all this chaos around me, just the people, the bustle of people, it just felt like it just stopped. And there was this quiet, and it felt like the serenity of a quiet pond without any ripple. And I heard God's voice. I heard the Creator, and he spoke into my soul, and it was so clear. It was like this drop on this still pond, and it resonated throughout my being. And he said something. It was so convicting. He was like, God was like, "Why are you killing your family?" It's like, you think you're against the New World Order, but you're a pawn of it. You're a tool of it. And it was just but it was said with love, but with conviction. And it hit me really hard. It just was like, and I looked around, and I just looked around this whole scape. It was just utter. It was like being in hell. People drunk and just stumbling around, just and there was chain link fences everywhere, and there was cops with the lights going, shining off the chain link fence, and people were like burning piles of plastic beer cups, and these billows of black smoke were here and there, and it was like a war zone. And I remember looking over here, and there was this drum circle maybe 100 feet away in a parking lot. And it was the first I saw these people were just zombies. And there was this dark hand like puppeting these people. And that was the first time it was like I saw the spirit, the same spirit that would come into us. It was over these people, and I feared that me seeing it would see me seeing it. And I was like, whoa. And it scared me because I was seeing it differently, not in it, but externally. And that freaked me out. Started to think, well, maybe this thing is going to send all these drummers to come and get me. But it freaked me out. And I looked over, and there's this cop on horseback carrying a naked hippie by the long hair, dragging him along, and this naked hippie is masturbating furiously. I mean, it's like the most crazy scene, and you're just like, all this stuff I was taking in, and God's voice was like showing me, it's like, this is the New World Order, like you are a part of it. And then I thought back about the Masonic symbol I just saw. That was when the first, I guess, the concept of that word sin, because I never understood that was, what does that mean? This kind of like nebulous definition. But that's when the conviction of the Creator's voice, and I'm seeing all this chaos and this deviation and this darkness, really, that's when the concept was like, maybe is sin this evil stuff that's infused in all of life and this planet, you know? Is this what this is? Is it more than just the government? Like, because before then it was like the government's bad, the concrete, the industry, the corporations, the killing, they're cutting the rainforest, but like shamanism and all these different tribes, like animism, that's all good. You know, not even to mention cannibals, but like, so there was this real black and white, like us and them, and it was the first time it's like all this dark evil stuff seems to be infused in the hippie culture, in the modern culture, in the corporate, everything. It was infused with this stuff. So that was shock. It was like a revelation. I didn't know what to make of it. I decided from that moment I was going to leave everything. I was going to leave the crew I was with. The next morning, I was out, and I was going to go up into the wilderness, the mountains, and not come back to society until I'd found truth, because I was so tormented. I was so confused. I didn't know what was true. And that's what I did. That night, my crew, we took a taxi back. I was really high. Went to the motel. I tried to sleep, and it was a trip because they were in the motel and the sun was coming up early in the morning, and it just felt evil. Just the sun was just like blaring, and they were watching MTV on the television, and it was striking because, this is when I talked about hearing music differently than what I was used to. They were playing the song "Black Hole Sun" by Soundgarden, and the music video was playing, and just something about it just felt off and evil. And I was trying to watch the video, and in the video, there's all these weird scenes of this kind of hippie Pied Piper character who's leading these young people, and they also show Christianity. They show preachers, but they're all distorted and kind of demonic and weird. And I got this sense, it was like, what's the deal? I was like, why are they doing that to Jesus or Christianity? Why it seems like they're trying to make Christianity look evil, but it looks, in my view, I could see that the whole thing looked evil. Like they looked evil, like the Pied Piper was evil, and the band itself was evil. Like, was the band itself was the Pied Piper drawing the counterculture youth? And I was like, what is going on? It was just like, what am I seeing? Because I loved Soundgarden. I loved the music before, but all of a sudden I saw it in this new light. And then that morning I left. They took off. I left. I was like, I'm out. I had about $300. Actually, I bought from my friend, I bought a gram of mushrooms. And then, because I was like, I didn't know what else to do but use psychedelics shamanistically. But what I knew I was going to do was going to go out into the woods, the hills, and I was going to humbly seek the spirit realm. And so I got a backpack. I bought in Eugene. We were in Eugene. I got a backpack. I went to, I got some supplies, camping supplies. I went to a new age store and got a rainbow of colored candles and black candles, white candles, all the candles. And I got these little bells to chant with. And I took a free bus, and then up in Eugene, there's free buses that go here and there. But there was, back in the day, there's a lot of hot springs out there, but there was this really popular hot springs that was out of town, up in the not mountains, but hills. And that's where all the hippies, you go, to the hot springs. Everyone's, no clothes, all hippies out there in the hot springs. So I took the free bus, went to this Eugene hot spring, but I veered off the path to the main, and I just went off into the woods to try to find a camp spot. And I was desperate. Excuse me. At this point, I was tormented. I felt like I had parasites in me from the possession, drum possession. I felt disgusting inside. The conviction of my life. I didn't know what was true. It felt like there's a saying like when you're praying, but like the skies were bronze. Like my prayers, just like there was no solace, there was no connection. I felt no life. Everything felt just dirty, and reality was crumbling. Like I don't know if most probably your audience won't be able to relate to this, but people who have experienced really, really dark stuff, like hellish things, demonic things, satanic things like this, it's very hard to come back. Like, and that's one of the arguments I think that the evil ones make, is that you've gone too far. Like, you can't come back. Like, you've seen too much. Um, it changes your perception of reality to make anything that looks like normal or like happy, or people who are actually joyful, they look fake and plastic, and it's almost like a bad Leave It to Beaver show from the 50s where everything feels fake, or like the Truman Show. Like that's what life was becoming for me. Like everything was fake and it seemed staged and phony. And um, I I just really I did there was nowhere to go because I had seen too much. And I mean, how do you exist in normal society? I mean, what do you just go get a job, go to a trade school when like you've seen like hell? It's like it, I didn't know what to do. So this is what the only thing I knew to do was to go seek spiritually what to do. Um, and so I go to this, I find a camp spot, and I make a camp, I make a fire. The sun is going down. It's starting to get a little cooler. I make up this mushroom tea and I drink it. I set out like a shrine of rainbow candles, white and black, all the colors. And I start to chant. I start tripping really hard. I begin to feel the mushrooms, and I just started like calling out, with a humble heart, because I'd never done that before. I was so proud, so self-righteous, and but I was broken, and I started just calling out to just Creator, like didn't know what, but I was calling, just please help, give me truth. And it was dark at this point. All of a sudden, man, I felt the most fear I'd ever felt in my life. All my hairs stood on end, and I started hearing the voices right up to my ear, like, "We're poisoning you." And they started laughing and mocking me, and I heard the most wicked voices like mocking me. And at first I started freaking out, and I was like, at first I thought that people were practicing witchcraft next to me, attacking me. I heard the voice of that woman that I was in love with at the time, and she was. I heard her voice, and she was like, "We're killing you, we're killing you, we're killing you," and laughing, um, and I started freaking out. I've never heard or experienced such hatred, like beyond human hatred. It was this hatred that was so overwhelmingly demonic that it was so intense. And I remember kind of almost panicking. The fear was so strong. I remember I ran to my backpack, and I had bought a book, and it was the only source of like goodness that I had. It was like self-reflection. It wasn't a witchcraft book. It was just Hinduistic type of self-realization to become a better person. And I was like, I've got to focus on innocence, And I started reading, and And as I was trying to focus on something good, like the coals in the fire start spitting at me and burning me, and then the laughter and the mockery starts. I mean, it was all around, and it felt like it was like you could hear a swarm of demonic activity. Um, and I bring up that there's a movie called Odd Thomas. It's very interesting. It's a very good book, but the movie has these demonic entities in it that's like the perfect description of what I was seeing. They're kind of liquid, really creepy things. The whole woods started filling with the stuff surrounding me, laughing at me, saying, you thought you had power and we gave you that power. It was basically like you're I don't want to curse. The demons often refer to people as bags of feces because that's what they see us like. We're disgusting. We're made of flesh and molecules and have feces in us, and we're bags of feces. And they were calling me that. You're just a bag of, cursing. And like I'd never experienced that much that hatred. That it was otherworldly hatred towards human. And these things were alien, and they hated the human that I was and I am. And then they started saying, um, they started chanting, we're poisoned you with the mushrooms. We're poisoning you with the mushrooms. And they were snickering at me. And so I, I thought, I want to get these out of me. So it was so terrifying. I put my finger down my throat and tried to throw up these mushrooms to just get them out of my system. It's too late by then, of course. But when I did that, all of a sudden, like 5 voices screamed out of me from high to low, screeching to low growls, just like, no. And these were it wasn't repressed anger. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't me. It wasn't my shadow self. It was the same entities that I had let in me in this drum possession. And they were in me and they were screaming, using my voice, and they were saying, no. And that flipped my mind. And all of the memories of how I had allowed, like what I had done to allow these things in me. Like all of a sudden I became a believer in demons. Before this, I didn't believe in demons. I remember while this is happening, I had this kind of sad, ironic memory of being a kid watching this goofy, cheesy B horror movie by Elvira. I don't know if some people might know of her, but it was a silly B movie, but Elvira was basically mocking Christianity. She was fighting, there was priests with holy water, and it was all a mockery of the idea of demons being afraid of holy water and all this stuff. And it was like the blinders lifted. All these things that I'd seen in culture, like everything was mocking demons, like they don't exist. Satan is a joke, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I have these demons screaming out of me. And it was beyond fear. It was a nightmare of nightmares. Like who do you tell, what are you gonna, like, they're gonna lock you away in a mental hospital? Who can you go to? I didn't know Christians knew how to deal with demons. Like I didn't have any idea. Never read the Bible, never read anything about what Jesus did, or, so that wasn't an option. I was like, and so these things are screaming out of me. I'm going into panic mode. I start, at this point, I'm a dreadlocked hippie, nasty dreads, not nice dreads, big clumpy dreads, hippie clothes, probably had overalls. I can't remember. Just had all these skull beads, bone beads, things in my hair, dreadlocks. I start throwing things in the fire that were magically associated with what I perceived as my own witchcraft practice. And when I threw things in the fire, like these beads went in the fire, then the entities in me started, no. And so I was like, throw it, like do whatever they don't want, right? And I'm throwing this stuff in the fire, and they're just it felt like claws digging into me. And again, it was like multiple voices. It sounded like aliens, creepy. And so, and then I finally started burning my clothes, everything. I burned my money, all my money I had, but everything. And then I started hacking my dreadlocks. I started cutting. I bought a Swiss Army knife, and I started hacking my dreads because they had magic things, little charms. And every time I'd throw something in the fire, they'd be like, no, no. And this is where I really believe that these entities, they were trying to get me to this place. And I finally came to this head where I was this wounded, crazed animal that was, you could hear, the voices, the language of these demons were so terrifying, so alien, and so hyper intelligent, beyond comprehension, with language that's eons old, like beyond old. And I was surrounded by these beings who were all mocking me, saying, well, this is, you've come to our party and you're the feast. We're gonna, eat your soul. And like, they were just laughing at me, like, you thought you were powerful, you thought you were a witch and a warlock, but we gave you that power. You're nothing but a bag of feces. You're just like just mocking my stupidity that I let them in, mocking my like gullibility, my naivete, that I would practice all these manipulations, letting them come into me, and all the witchcraft that I was doing manipulatively. And they just were they pure hatred. And at first they started to talk. It was like they would mock me and then converse with themselves. And they started conversing with themselves. This sounds crazy, but this is what I was experiencing. And like, they started conversing with like, and then I started thinking, maybe there's a way out. Maybe there's something that I can do to get out of this place. And I really believe they were working me up to get to this point. And all of a sudden, they attack. It was just full on attack. I felt like the fear was astronomically just exploded in my brain. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that like hell, the portal of hell was opening, and I was going to be devoured. And so I thought, if I don't get out of my body, I'm going to my soul will be devoured, which is crazy, of course. And so I tried to, I had the Swiss Army knife. I tried to slice my wrists upwards, but the blade wasn't that sharp. It wasn't like a razor sharp. And so it was just making superficial cuts, and I was like digging into my arms. And but then I thought, I'm going to go for my jugular vein. And I started hacking my neck with the force of like hitting myself with this knife so that it would cut my neck open. And I was truly convinced that if I didn't get out of my body, I would be devoured. And of course that's what they wanted, right? I was the sacrifice. I mean, I was the human sacrifice. They didn't need other Satanists to do it. They got me to do it. And so I after a while, I kept hacking and hacking. My neck was a tattered mess. I could stick my hand and feel the tendons, and there was blood like dripping down I'm naked at this point. I have all my hair cut out. And at this point, people came out of the woods to me. And the first that came, it looked like a lumberjack guy with a plaid jacket. And I looked at, and I ran up to him. I was like, help me. And I grabbed him. And the fear, I think, in him, made me fearful. I looked into his eyes, and it was just black saucers of fear. And there was this firelight, right, and the shadows. And I jumped back, And in my crazy state, I thought that they were demons materialized to try to stop me from getting out of my body. Of course, they were there to help me. At one point, some guy came behind me and knocked me with this big log, trying to knock the knife, but I just rolled and was like a crazed animal. And they were scared for their lives because I had this knife in my hand. I'm blood soaked. All my hair's cut off. I'm like totally and crazy, screaming because these demons are just like screaming out of me. It was crazy. They start backing off and they're trying to get help. I didn't know this, but they were flashing flashlights but they were freaking me out. And I made a circle around the fire in the dirt as like a magical ring of protection. And I just sat in the circle and I was just screaming because I wasn't dying. And I started screaming, but it was me screaming. It wasn't demons. I was just screaming in just fear and anger. It was just like thinking that if I just screamed loud enough, they would go away. And then I just look up at the stars, beautiful stars. And I started screaming, why, just to God, to Creator. I was like, why is this happening? It was a living nightmare. I had gone so far, and all of a sudden, in an instant, I was surrounded by a warm blanket of love. Instant, like it was like the hosts of heaven came and pushed away all the demons, the darkness. It was like just light, the whole campsite filled with light. And all of a sudden, I was in it. I felt like a child again. And I felt the joy of being alive again, just like that. Just boom. I felt this love like I'd never felt love, unconditional, beautiful, just like we have you and you're safe now. And there was, I sensed guards just around me, guarding me. And I was so full of joy. I remember grabbing a sock on the ground and I put it around my neck. And I just came sober. And I was like, I've got to get out of here. It was just like, I need to leave this place. And so I just started walking down the mountain at night, left all that stuff behind, but I was with this entourage of angelic protection. And it was, the joy of being saved, like where your soul was saved. Like my body, at that point, you don't care. Like I could have lost an arm, a foot. It doesn't matter because my soul was spared. And I walked barefoot, naked through the woods, got scars on my feet, going through like marshy, swampy land. But I was so full of joy, and I didn't care about my body because I knew I was alive. I knew I'd been saved from this terrible fate. And the demons, I could sense them kind of yapping like little dogs, but they were away from me, and I had this protection. I remember finally hit a road, and it was at night. And there's this beautiful road out in the middle of nowhere, no cars, and there was silhouettes of these pine trees and a starry sky. You could see like the Milky Way, and the road was actually warm from the day sun, and my feet, I was barefoot, I was naked, and so it was just like, and God was there. It was so beautiful, and I walked so grateful, and I finally got help. I went to the hot spring. There was these kids, 4 kids, not kids, sorry. They were young people. They're probably like 18 or something. This girl and boy, they come up and they find me, and I get help, and they wrap me in a towel. I ended up going to the hospital. I had to get staples in my neck, and the doctors were like, the main doctor gathered the other ones, like, look, they were like, you should be dead. Everything is cut except the jugular vein. Everything was hacked. Like they had to staple like flaps together. Yeah, it was a mess. Um, and yeah, I was in the hospital for like 2 days, and then they released me, and I was homeless. Didn't know where to go. They got me some clothes. I looked pretty weird. I had a bandage, and I had like some like exercise like sweats or something, and some shoes. And I was like, I don't know where to go. So I decided I'm going to go back to Eugene Hot Springs and try to find my stuff. I didn't know what happened. It was a mystery. And I was like, I want to grab my backpack. So I took a free bus. I started walking up the hill, and there was these people walking, because it's a hot spring. People go, and this young woman, she was like, she was like, "Whoa, you're the guy." She was like, "You're the guy. I've had nightmares for days because of you." She was like, "We were the family that were camping near you." And she said, "We heard a whole group of weird chanting and people and sounds. It was like a whole like ritual going on with like a group of people, and they crept. That's how they found me, because they actually heard this weird stuff going on, but they heard multiple people. They were just, yeah, and they were like, the poor thing, she was like, I've had nightmares. That was the most scary thing we've ever seen. So they were the one that kind of snuck up on me, because they thought it was some sort of satanic ritual going on. That was weird. I was like, wow, okay, something really heavy did happen. So I got my stuff. I ended up finding my stuff. She showed me where it was. And I finally, I knew it was right around July 4th, which is the time when the Rainbow Gathering happens. And so the only thing I knew to do is to hitchhike to the gathering, because I had no one. I didn't know what to do. I knew the Rainbow Gathering, maybe I could find some spiritual people there. And so I hitchhiked to Wyoming to the gathering, and was really tormented. Every time I would try to go to sleep, I would hear like voices like this, and I'd wake up in fear, like all that stuff. I actually had a Wiccan witch tried to exorcise demons, these entities out of me, without success. It was didn't work, and I was tormented. I was desperate. And this one guy, towards the end of the festival, was like, "Hey," he found me. I told him my story. He's like, "Hey, man, there's a Christian kitchen." Because the Rainbow Gathering is just a collection of different kitchens around a main circle. People cook food for you. There's like the Hare Krishna camp. There's the fairy camp, which is like the gay camp. There's like all these camps, Buddha camp. But they said, it's this place called the Bread of Life. You should go check it out. I think they could help you. And I was like, oh man. It's like, I don't want anything to do with Christians. I felt repulsed by the idea, but I was desperate. I just went anyway. I found their camp, which is way off the beaten path. And I just sat there. I just sat there and watched them, right? And they weren't preaching. They were just like, you could tell they were earthy. They were families. Maybe they were hippies. They're kind of hippie-ish, and they were just real. And they were just feeding people. And I remember just watching him, and the spirit of love and light was so palpable. It was so strong in that kitchen that I like knew without a shadow of a doubt I could sleep here and be protected by these things that were tormenting me. But it was interesting. At the same time, there was this wrestling match of like something would rise up where I would judge like, oh, these Christians, they're stupid. I'm so spiritual, I'm so advanced, and blah blah. But then like the conviction of like how filthy I'd become. It was like I was so disgusting so full of evil. It's like I couldn't take a shower to get it off. So in the presence of this light, my own darkness was very apparent. And they hadn't said a word. I was just watching them. And I remember I ate food. They at the camps, they have like little wash stations because you bring your own dish and you're camping. So I went to wash my dish, and on this tree there was a quote that Jesus had said. Well, first, actually, there's a quote in the Bible. It says, "For our righteousness is as filthy rags." And all of our righteousness has become like filthy rags. And in another scripture, it says, "For we're saved by grace, not by works, good works, lest anyone should boast." And man, that hit me hard. Like I'd always just thought of the good path or the spiritual path to be like, oh, you have to be like Mother Teresa, and you have to be a monk, and you have to give up, do all these things to work your way into the spiritual life. And it was just, all of a sudden it was just presented like, this is a free gift. And then there was another sign, and it was Jesus, Yeshua, Messiah. And he said, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. He who believes in me, rivers of living water shall flow from his innermost being." And it's like the words on that sign, like literally came alive and shot into my soul. And the person, there was an actual person. It wasn't a philosophy, because I'd read, I was actually looking into Hare Krishnaism and Buddha, all kinds of stuff. I'd read books trying to find this spiritual path. They never once, I never encountered the person. And it was a person, and that person that was shooting from these words was the same person who had visited me when I was young, calling me, same person. And I just was like, I wept. It shot into my soul, and I knew that Jesus, this path was there, and it was the way out. And I found, I just was stunned. I went back, I sat by the fire, and this old hippie Christian came, and he sat next to me, and he said, would you like to be forgiven and washed from your wicked deeds and sins? Would you like Jesus to come be a part of your life? Would you like to follow Jesus? And I said, yes, and I prayed a prayer. I asked, Creator, please forgive me. I'd done such wicked things, against my own conscience, very self-centered, wicked manipulations. I was dirty inside. And I asked, I'm sorry. And it was like coming back to the parents, it was like the prodigal son, when he spent all his money on prostitutes and partying, and it was like coming home. It's very humbling. And I said, I'm sorry. And I asked Jesus to come into my life and heart, and I just wept. It felt like 1,000 pounds lifted. And that was that day, and he gave me this little New Testament Bible, and that was it for that encounter. And I was still homeless. What was really interesting, that night was the start of about a 2-year battle of the most terrifying nightmares. So that night, I was in a cellar. I was sleeping in this dream in the cellar, and I was in this underground bunker, cement, dark, pitch dark, except for this oil barrel fire. And it was that guy, my teacher, and I was fearful of him. He had such an intense radiant power and he came up to me, the silhouette behind, and then I saw his face, and it wasn't him. It was a demon, but he had cut his face off and put on the skin, and he starts going of that guy that was my teacher guy, and he was like, "Why did you leave me?" And he started, "Why did you leave me?" And I was like, "What did I leave?" I didn't know I was owned by anyone, which was a trip. And all I knew, I remember just some instinct. I just started calling out. I said, Jesus. And all of a sudden, was like this earthquake. And this demon's like, no. And boom, and rocks started falling. And then I woke up and with sleep paralysis, and you can't move. And I could hear him just screaming and in distance, and I could barely move, fear all over me. And I just, Jesus, 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 Jesus. Um, and I was like, what is going on? Like, what is going on? Like, I never knew what kind of I didn't know there was a spiritual battle for my soul, but it was slowly being evident. And so that was the first night of a many nights. And I hitchhiked that day or that night because it was the end of the festival. I decided to hitchhike to Dallas. I hitchhiked, and I remember I was in New Mexico on my way back to Dallas. I'd asked the church, and they'd give me a bus ticket from New Mexico to Dallas. And I remember sitting in this little bus station with nobody in it. It was this tiny little bus station, the windows, pane glasses, dirty, but the sunlight was coming through, man. And it was so beautiful, and it was quiet. And I remember, oh yeah, that Bible. And I was like, my flesh didn't want to read it. There's something, I was like, but I took it out and I just opened it, start reading in the New Testament. And the first passage was about this father who had a demon-possessed son, and the son would foam at the mouth, and the demons would throw him into fire or water trying to hurt him or kill him. And Jesus cast these demons out. And I could not believe my eyes. Like, I'd never opened a Bible in my life, and I'm like, what in the world? What? This is in here? Like, nobody told me. Like, Jesus casting out demons, and this is real? Like, this is in here? I just blew my mind. I knew nothing about Jesus, demons, nothing. I remember my mom told me when I was a kid, like, the Bible's a boring history book. I didn't know anything about it. And that just blew my mind. And I read as much as I could, and I just started absorbing it. And I was like, wow, man, this is crazy. And ended up going to Dallas. It's a long story, but I'll cut to, like, I got into right away, my old friends started drinking. This, in the course of a month, this happened. Just didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go, really. I had no grounding. I didn't know what church was. So, besides those hippie people, like, it was so stiff and formal. I wouldn't fit in. Like, I was still a homeless guy. But I was desperate, man. And I was at a bus stop, and I heard this woman's preaching her story. African-American lady saying she was in the gutter, heroin addict, but she had tears running down her face. And man, I started crying. And I was like, I gotta have Jesus. I gotta have this. And I tried to find their church. I got a pamphlet, and I got on a bus, and I started taking this bus, trying to find this place. Ended up, it started to get dark at night. It was getting darker, and I was like, I was in a bad part of Dallas, a dangerous part of Dallas. So I was this white kid. I was like 19, scrawny kid. And I didn't know what to do. And in the seat that I sat in on the bus happened to have this tract, like this Christian tract, and it was a story of this man who had been in like a prison mine back in like 1800s. And he had died and seen hell and all these demons, and he had come back and become a Christian. And that was like trippy. It was like, whoa. But then I'm like lost. I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to find you. I don't know where I am. And all of a sudden, I look out the window. We're in the ghetto, like apartment projects, really bad in Dallas. It used to be. Dirt lawns, no grass, cramped little apartments. And there was this revival going on with one old lady with her black church lady hat with the fruit on it or whatever. I don't know, it was fruit. She's all dressed up. She has like 10 chairs that are empty, and there's 2 other people with her, and they're praising God with a tambourine. And I felt God said, go there. And I'm like, okay. And so I ding the bus. I get off the bus, get off. And this crazy white dude, just like just walks up, awkward, man. You could like, it was so awkward. I'm like, what do I do? And I just kind of listen, bob my head, listen to music. And they stopped singing and they said, come here, baby. And this little old lady, she's like, baby, come here. You want me to pray for you, baby? And I was like, yeah, I would love that. Please do. And she gets a little anointing oil and she's like, and they all lay hands on me and they say, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. And she puts her hand on me. And man, I'm telling you, the demons were in me, freaked out, cursing, just start, my eyes go back in the back of my head. My whole body contorts and they're like, no. And they're cursing you, blah, blah. And I'm inside of me, my heart, I'm like, Jesus, please help me. Please help me. Please take these things out of me. And my body, though, is like contorting, and like my eyes are, and I'm just contorting into like the most demonic shapes, cursing in there in the name of Jesus. And they start speaking in tongues over me. And this language, man, I've never been exposed to this, but the language they were speaking, the speaking in tongues, was burning the demons that were in me. They were just like hated. It was like throwing fire on them. And I was like, who are these people? These are like kung fu warriors. This was blowing my mind. But I was so desperate. I was like, please, God, deliver, get these things out of me, you know? And so they're praying. I started speaking in tongues. And I believe I got the gift of, but it wasn't something that I had to think about much because I already knew that there was demonic tongues. I used weird tongues. So whatever this language, I started speaking this language that they started speaking. And the demons just screamed, it felt like claws, just like I could barely get out because they hated it so much. And so I'm just doing it, man. I'm like, ah, like praying, like, God help me, speaking in tongues. And finally they scream, and then this high pitched scream whined out of me. And I was like covered in just peace. And my body just laid out, and they carried me down to the ground. I was just bathed in this river of peace. It was like oil was being poured. You've heard it in some charismatic churches. It was just, I didn't know you were supposed to do that. I didn't know that happened. Never even heard of it. And I was experiencing it. I'm in the ghetto. There's cop cars. Woo! And like, it's at night. And I'm like a baby. I'm like perfectly protected. I feel God's peace, forgiveness. And I'm thinking, what in the world is happening to my life? You know, I'm like, who are these people? Like, who are these people? Like, are they even real? Are they, you know what? I was still in that, I was so shocked by all of this crazy stuff. I was thinking, okay, like the movie Men in Black. I was like, okay, are they some sort of like agents, like some kung fu intergalactic agents or something, like hiding as like in the ghetto? Oh, it was so weird. I was like, man, who are these people? Because they knew what to do with demons and they dealt with them. And the demons hated it. They hated the name of Jesus. They obeyed them. And then I'm lying there, and I'm just all these memories of all the music I'd listened to. Everything mocking Christianity, or, I sold my soul for rock and roll, AC/DC, all these album covers where they're like demons and like thinking parties of hell. And like, but when you're covered, your eyes are covered, your mind is covered, so you can't see it. You think it's normal music. But when your eyes open, you're like, whoa, what? It's just been right in front of my face the whole time. And it was just revelation after revelation, and God's Spirit, just started showing me. And so I ended up, long story short, I ended up moving to Colorado with a couple who was part of the Bread of Life Kitchen. They took me in. They're like my parents. They had 3 children, and they took me in. I mean, the self-sacrifice that they did for me, a complete stranger. They took me into their home, and they loved me, and they were like hippie-ish, you know. They were like ski bums who had gotten born again, and they were just so sweet. And the man was the husband, Bruce. He was the father I needed. And he was so patient. He was a carpenter, and he taught me how to work. He taught me slowly how to work and build, and like he was so patient. And um, he taught me morals and like character, you know, slowly. And they fed me all this organic, good hippie food. And yeah, and I got deliverance. So it took a lot of exorcism, you know. The church I was with there, they all prayed and fasted for a week, and the pastor and a couple other men had a pretty gnarly exorcism. It was a lot of work. You know, people who think that the stuff just happens, that's folly. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Um, you know, Jesus himself, there was a demon who was resisting him, and he finally said, "What's your name?" And then the demon says his name, and then he casts him out. But I mean, even the demons resisted Jesus himself, like sometimes. So, uh, exorcism is a lot of times very messy and very prolonged, and it's a drag, man. But it's such a blessing to get free. Um, so yeah, praise God. That's how I came to the Christian faith. So it's been a very strange 30 years since then, because I'm 50 now. So it's been a while.
What a
Oh,
story. It's
man.
so intense.
Mm.
That's why I didn't want to
Yeah.
interrupt, and I just let you tell your story. There's a few things that I noticed though that I wanted to point out, because all of this, it almost sounds like a dream, you know, or a psychosis episode that was happening in your head, but it wasn't. And obviously, like, you have your perspective, you can say that, but I think that the thing that can tell us, like people from the outside, that this actually was not that, is the little detail you mentioned about the people that were camping next to you,
Mm.
because they heard a group,
Yeah.
and when they came, there was only you, but you could
Yes.
hear like the group of people around you doing these chants, and they could as well. And so they corroborated that the experience that you were having was not just yours in your head, it was something more than that. Now, what is it exactly? I don't have the answer, but it's something real. It's not a figment of your imagination. So that was the first thing. And then, you know, throughout your story, music is a theme that comes back over and over. And it's so fascinating. We talked about the influence and the impact the music can have on people, right? And at the end, it seems like during your exorcism, your deliverance, or whatever it was, that particular part of the story, I forget exactly where, but you were shown these albums and these songs that totally had manipulated you into
Mm-hmm.
some of these things without your knowledge. And it's kind of going back full circle, right? That music has the power to do some of these things, and we need to be intentional and be careful about
Yeah.
what we let into our ears, what we let into our spirit. So that was kind of the reminder. So, man, I just wanted to say that, but thank you for sharing so much. I know it's probably not easy to talk about these things, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
talking about them.
Oh, yeah. Hope it helps give light to someone, you know, who is struggling, going, what's happening to my life?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And talking about these people that might be struggling, I mean, there's a lot of people around the world that think the way that you used to think. Just that, you know, good and evil is a spectrum. That's a teaching in a bunch of different religions. There's a lot of hippies still to this. I mean, it's not as big this day. It's more like new age kind of stuff that has taken over kind of this space, this rebellious space. But there's a lot of people that think in a very similar way that you used to think. And if you were to talk to them and give them one message, one thing that you could tell them that hopefully you would want them to remember, what would it be?
You know, my faith is based, like my faith in Jesus and Christianity is personally based on this weird, for one, this demonic experience and then learning that the Bible talks all about everything that this was happening. I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe I should listen to this. It talks about demons. It talks about that the world is under the sway of the demonic powers and principalities. And so that gives it a lot of cred for me, because it was, experienced that firsthand. But one thing in the Bible, the scriptures promise and talk about, and Jesus himself talks about, is that this life it's a testing ground. The kingdom, they call it the kingdom of God, which is talks about that this earth will have an end, that evil will come to an end. It'll be everlasting joy. There'd be no pain, no more suffering, no more confusion. And actually, the Bible says that we will be like him because we'll see him as he truly is. And so there's this almost deification. We won't become God, but we'll become like God, and we'll have fellowship, and it's a family. And so this whole world is preparing our character. And so the only thing that matters is your soul and goodness and virtue and love and purity and holiness and things that are good and right. And God, the creator, has put laws and said, this is evil and this is good. And the evil one would want you to think, well, that's very, controlling, and that puts binds on me. But imagine if the whole creator of the universe, Jesus came, one of the last things he did was all his students and disciples, he washed their feet. And that was like the lowest thing in society. Like that was like for the slave class to do, or the people who are like low, like paid nothing. And it was a dishonor. But Jesus did that, and his disciples were like, why are you doing this? Don't do this. And he said, I am showing you how my heart is. So the whole, like, the creator of the entire galaxy is saying, I want you to be humble, to be kind, to be loving, to be forgiving, and I want to show you how. And he came, God in the flesh, was Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and he showed us how to love one another in preparation of the next world, which will be forever. Like, this meaningless little world is such a finite thing. We're all being prepared to go to the next life. And there's a commingling of your free will with God's will. And there's this beautiful thing. When you say, yes, please, I want this, help me. Holy Spirit, come into me. The Spirit changes you, will change your desires, will make you a totally different person, make you like a child again, make you not want the things of this world that are evil. And so I guess I would just plead with you, like, be a child and be humble, be teachable, and God will, like Jesus promised too, he said, knock and the door shall be open. And it's a promise, 100%, that if you, with all your heart, a humble heart, ask for God to come, to show you, to give you a new life, to open up, like, truth, like, are you real? You can start there. Are you real, God? 100%, God will come and show you new realities, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. Cole and I recorded over 3 hours of content, and you only got to hear about half of it. So if you want more, then head over to our website. As always, you can listen to the very beginning of the conversation where Cole talked about how he got his first spiritual awakening around 9 years old. We also got a few bonus stories in which Cole really dug deep into how music can be used to manipulate the masses. And finally, we had an amazing after show and talked about his current ministry and some of the things that God has been doing in his life. You can listen to the audio versions for free, and that should answer most of your questions. But if you have more, you can submit them to me, and I'll do my best to answer them in our AMAs on the website. The links to all of this will be in the description. That's it for today. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed.